Welcome to the Rethink Leadership podcast with me, Jeremy Blaine. I interview leaders, experts and business professionals from around the world who are bringing leadership principles and know-how into the digitally driven 21st century workplace, with focus firmly on the how-to rather than the what. Each episode is in aid of a charity chosen by my guests, and since 2020, we've made donations to over 80 global and local causes. The blended workforce, the coming together of permanent part-time and independent workers of all designations as the formalised workforce mix of the future now. I share a passion for demonstrating the power and potential of this blended workforce with my guest for this episode of the Rethink Leadership podcast, Brea Starmer. When Brea was laid off during her pregnancy, she resolved to find a solution to the all-or-nothing career model for herself and for others like her. She set out to create a new set of conditions in which individuals could thrive on their own terms and alongside a community. So she founded in 2018 Lions and Tigers, a company that enables enterprises and public sector organisations to tap into the nearly 50% of highly skilled professionals choosing independent work. Lions and Tigers builds blended workforces that integrate fractional and freelance experts with client teams, helping leaders scale with agility, with accessibility to top-tier talent, and in achieving their goals in new ways. Under Brea's leadership, Lions and Tigers has created over 34 million in economic opportunity for over 250 consultants, with a team comprising of 87% women and 33% of people of the global majority. We discuss this, the blended workforce, and Brea's new research, the Workforce Reimagined, unlocking the power of blended teams. This episode is in aid of Doctors Without Borders, to which we've made a donation as a thank you to Brea for joining us. Hi, Brea. Thank you so much for joining me. Please introduce yourself, your business, and your passion.
Sure. It's so nice to see you, Jeremy. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Brea Starmer. I am the CEO of Lions and Tigers. I am a mother of 3 kids under 10. I am out of Seattle, Washington on stateside, and I am thrilled to be alongside you. My passion is about unlocking the workforce. And I come to that conversation having been a mother that was laid off while pregnant. And so I have a very distinct lens around advocacy and economic opportunity to keep folks in the workforce. And so I have built my business with that premise in mind, but I now meet you as an enterprise advocate for building workforces that include many, many people.
I'm sure it's not very pleasant at the time, but almost helpful with what you've had to deal with and what you've been through as well, as a mother, as a business person, as a leader, in also looking at the workplace with a different lens and how it should be inclusive for everybody and there for everybody, no matter what your designation, right?
For sure. I didn't expect to face discrimination at work. I mean, I guess maybe I entered into the workforce somewhat naive. I was the first to graduate from college in my family. And so going into enterprise tech was very different from anything I had ever known. And I didn't expect to be in such few numbers. In tech, we see by the age of 35, 50% of women drop out or are first forced out. And I didn't know that was what I was signing up for when I took that first job. And so, yes, I didn't anticipate that would be my path. And also, I'm a capitalist, so I understand, hiring, firing, reductions in forces are common tools that we use when we're designing talent models. But I come from this as a human, as someone who believes in agency and stability. And I think that we could do it different ways. And so we've been testing that. We've been testing building models differently to see if we can prove a better way of work.
Fantastic. Now, being English, I have to ask about your name because our Prime Minister is Keir Starmer. Any relation?
I should double check. I hear that often. I get pinged often around the Starmer connection. My husband is Starmer. I changed my name when I got married. He does have German and some UK roots. So there is some potential there that I haven't gotten any invitations to any special parties yet, but perhaps, perhaps I
Oh,
should
well,
look it
I
up.
can see the marketing for this episode.
Yes. We should just assume. Let's just go with it. I've got no
Why
reason to
not?
say that
Why
it's
not?
not
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
Um, well, I let's get into your passions right now for the workplace and the workforce. And I'd like you to define what you mean by the blended workforce and why organizations everywhere should take more notice.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jeremy, you are truly ahead of me in documenting some of these terms and sort of cutting through the noise. So I stand on your shoulders when I talk about how we think about blended teams. So where I come from in enterprise tech, when I was a full-time employee at Microsoft, it was me plus three vendors, and that's how I ran my business. And I always worked that way from the start. It was never odd to me. And so now, as we think about building blended teams, as I run Lions and Tigers as an outsourced business, I think about it as the very intentional combination of full-time employees or part-time employees who are on W-2 payroll alongside the independent workforce working together towards a shared mission. And sometimes that's in a small team, and sometimes that's across a broad organization, maybe a leader, an enterprise leader with a team of 300, and it's a mixed group. And now within the independent workforce, if you click down, that's where I'd love to start getting creative and playing with roles like advisors and coaches and fractional executives and independent doers, strategic consultants. There's so many flavors within that world, and that's where I love to play and I love to light up new opportunities that look different, because many of the folks that are attracted to this model are brilliant, highly skilled workers who just can't click in for one reason or another to a full-time 9 to 5, 40-hour a week commitment, often in office. And so we look at bringing in all of the other spectrum of options so that we can build that really cohesive talent model in service of one mission. I'm sorry. And you asked in the second part of that question, which is like, why is that so important, right? Okay, let me get to that. So when I think of blended teams today, and I think it's really changed probably since even you and I started, when I started freelancing 10 years ago in the States here in America, I was one of about 22% of Americans that were starting to get into freelance work as a plan A. Now, for me, it was a plan B because I got laid off. And so I turned to freelance work to pay my mortgage. But now we see nearly, at least in my country, nearly 50% of our workforce is opting into independent work as plan A. And so the pressures that we see coming down for organizational leaders who are having to move faster than they've ever had to move, they're trying to be more innovative than they've ever been with a workforce that is limited only to their full-time employees, leaves out nearly half the workforce. So it's just not really truly possible to get business done today without building a blended team strategy.
Yeah, I like where you started that with that intentional combination now, going from thinking about either managed services or the contractors, as we talked about before, to actually a formal part of your valued workforce. And you're embracing a diversity of thinking, you're embracing that global knowledge base or a much wider knowledge base, at least, and so on. But it's also formalizing choice for employees as well. I can go now one way or I can go another. I have the power of choice to do things, which I think is why employees are having a little bit more power also within organizations at the moment. But maybe we'll come to that. But what I'm really interested to get to, Brea, is that you've just published a major piece of research called the Workforce Reimagined 2025, Unlocking the Power of Blended Teams. And that absolutely piqued my interest and I've been devouring it. So I would like to pass you the stage now so that you can share some of the big headlines that leaders, HR pros should really sit up and take note of.
Yeah, thank you. And I also am super fascinated by this topic. And there really wasn't a lot of research done on blended teams. There's lots of research on where people are working, burnout, stress, HR pressures, productivity, but really no one had looked at the blended team model and asked, is this working? And so we tapped in a brilliant strategist and behavioral researcher. Her name is Dr. Pam Cohen from Read the Room Advisors. She's actually helped some of our clients looking at their own organizations and culture levers there. And so we brought her in to build a study for us, which we did in the summer of 2025. And so this study, we went out and we went pretty broad. So we talked to more than 500 leaders across various industries, mostly very senior leaders. It skewed a little bit more male. We had about 57% representation from male identifying respondents and actually pretty heavy caregiver respondents. So more in the 70th percentile of folks who identify as caregivers. So an interesting pool of respondents. And we asked a number of questions about how they were using the blended workforce. How does it, sit among their other strategies? And we found some really interesting information there, Jeremy, which it sounds like you are seeing as well. I'll just talk about some of the big shifts that we saw. In the past, we've seen, to your point, sort of like bolt-on strategies or managed services as outsourced options. But what we saw in the data was pretty incredible. That not only is blended teams a strategy that we think is interesting to business leaders, but they gave back to us with no uncertain terms the critical nature of blended teams as a business strategy for them. In fact, one of the statistics that really just knocked me down, it was a stat that I called "keep your hands off my blended teams," and that was that 97% of respondents told us that losing access to a blended team would be totally disruptive to the way that they do business. And that to me was so illustrative of the role that blended teams offer within an organization. The other thing that I think was interesting is that, when I was in school, my business teacher said, you get good, cheap, or fast, pick two. And in the past, we have thought a lot about outsourced talent probably being a low cost option for businesses. But what we saw in the data was that the number one reason that people go to blended teams is access to specialized skill. And that I think is a shift from what we saw years ago. And truly, with the rise of AI, with the rise of the independent workforce being some of the most skilled and talented folks and home for some of these people who really are incredibly skilled, it makes sense that this is where the tool would be used to bring in the specialized skill. But it wasn't just that, it was that they needed high quality, that the bet was being made so that they could have high quality work among this group. And then the last thing I'll share with you that I thought was super interesting and that the researchers called the maturity effect. And so what we saw is that for leaders that use blended teams over time, they got more strategic as an organization over time. So for leaders that used it for more than 3 years, they rated blended teams as 21% more effective than when they first start. They were able to better communicate with their leadership team. They were better to advocate for how the model was impacting the business outcomes overall. So it was really incredible to see how folks got even better the more that they used it. So those were a few of the takeaways that really stood out to me from the study.
It's interesting when you've got teams like that who are highly skilled, motivated, you can empower better, you can lead at all levels, as we've talked about a lot in business over the years, but never quite got it right. And you've got time as a senior leader to then focus more strategically again and think about actually how do you navigate this future that we have, which is very uncertain and unpredictable. And in some organizations that aren't embracing this, it seems incredibly difficult to do that as they're rallying against short-term results. Going back to a couple of things here, I can understand that almost all of those respondents talk about once they've experienced this, it's very hard to go back because the value is there if you get it right. And it represents that shift from role-based recruitment to skills-based recruitment. And that small shift itself in mentality terms is opening up the world for blended teams to if you like almost come of age, I would say, from that point of view. So instead of your workforce, you've now got a crowd force or whatever you want to call it, and they're doing it. And for you, were there any surprises in this, Brea?
I think that the surpriser for me was around quality of work. That essentially, because we had heard anecdotally from our clients that, especially for folks that are underrepresented in leadership, to make risky bets, there's a lot that goes into that. And so for me, the data that really showcased how this mitigated risk and improved quality was really helpful, I think, in how we explain the value to our clients, how we talk to them about how this really is a tool to help them sort of take some chips off of the table, to help like bring in the team that is going to help get them there faster. We've been saying all of that, but to be able to showcase that really, I honestly felt relieved when I saw the data. Like, okay, it's not just us that is seeing this. And I would just say, sort of anecdotally, Lions and Tigers is growing at a time when some of our competitors who are in more traditional outsource models aren't. And I didn't know why. I knew that people liked us, but we've been incredibly impactful over the last 7 years running blended teams when our competitors are running staff orgs or management consultant playbooks where you just get the same playbook over and over again from a big four consulting firm. We've thought about it differently in this like very strategic integration of talent. We call it operating in your highest and best use. And we think about that across the team and what that's been able to afford our team members. And you talk about, keeping folks in the workforce too, Jeremy. Lions and Tigers in the last 7 years, we have been able to allow and enable $34 million of economic opportunity for our workforce, more than 400 consultants. And of them, 85% of them self-identify as women. Many of them are caregivers. And we're going into organizations where 3 in 10 employees are women. And in our workforce, nearly 9 in 10 are women. And so I think we're just proving a model, and the data is helping to sell the model in at a time when there is risk around thinking about how we build inclusive, innovative teams. I think you're on mute, Jeremy. Oh, Jeremy.
Yes, since COVID, I don't know how many times I've used the mute button, but I still have to get reminded sometimes. It was because I was so excited to respond to that, because it's, for me, what you're describing there is competitive advantage, and you're also talking about the beauty of a more inclusive and diverse workforce that comes with very specific skill sets, but also a motivation that you might not have also from long in the tooth permanent workers. So that train has left the station. That debate around diversity, inclusion, it's left the station no matter what's happening in the short term, I think. And you're proving it, and congratulations. I mean, what a business. So I'm going to immediately put you on the spot now, Brea,
okay,
and ask for your advice. So
go for it.
So for organizations that are considering this, right, blended teams is the way forward, and how do I formalize that? So what are the sort of tips that you could give to optimize integration, to build high performance, high impact culture across that, where every employee, regardless of the designation, is valued, contributes, and feels a part of the workforce, which is really accelerating?
Well, there's a full book here, probably, to answer that holistically. But a few things I've seen that I think are helpful. For a leader that's just starting, like, okay, I believe that this blended team thing is going to help me. So I'm going 0 to 1. I recommend we start small. We start building pilots. We start building a muscle. So maybe we're looking at a parental leave backfill. Here in America, we don't have paid leave or backfill programs systemically. So those are often done ad hoc. But maybe we're looking at a 3 to 4 to 6 month backfill. And so we have to really think then about what do we bring in? What is that skill that we bring in? How do we write the standard operating procedures that person can take and run with? So that's like one example. Another example might be I have an offsite coming up and I need a facilitator to help drive my leadership team forward. So we're bringing in a spot coach to run us through something that we don't have in house. Oftentimes we're brought in to do a culture study what's the tone of the group right now? HR doesn't have the in-house ability to do that sort of cultural measurement, and so they're looking at something like very specific and project-based. So I would start dabbling with a number of examples to start building some and to start testing the system. You're going to start running into things like procurement. How do we actually write the contract and get the dollars out the door? We're going to run into things like security. What information do I give and where do I keep it? How do I keep it safe? Those are things. And then you're going to start running into like culturisms. So how do we make sure that they understand the mission that we're up against, or the dent we're trying to make in the world, and how do I bring them in? I had a executive once named Eduardo, and he had a whole team of folks, a blended team way back when. He didn't call it that, he didn't use that term, but it was a bunch of employees and a bunch of consultants. I was a consultant then. And I remember he brought us all around for an offsite, and he was talking to us about his sales goals ahead. So, I mean, I was fully embedded in everything that he was doing so I could understand his strategy. And at one point, he said to everyone in the room, he goes, "I now know everyone that you know." And I was like, hell yeah. like he tapped me in, and I was like, let me open my Rolodex for you so that I can get you what you need. Like we can move better together faster. And so I think it's such a core leadership value. Great leaders are great leaders for blended teams too. Having strong vision and mission, talking about your values, and then some of the paperwork stuff, that's where you really need to partner with legal and HR or a firm like ours to think about how to structure it in a way that's risk minded, but also outcome oriented. So those are just a few like basic tips, but there's probably a lot more to that discussion we could have.
Well, I like the fact that you've talked about that. You have to be prepared to experiment a little bit here, see where it works, see how it works, be prepared to go down some rabbit holes and learn. It's almost part of building a learning culture again within the organization, which is no bad thing, I would say, in some that have been struggling. So once you've done that, then and maybe this is unfair to come back on that, then is that, are there any other specific sort of processes or systematic changes that help this along, Brea?
Yeah, I think it depends on the size of your organization and maturity of the organization. So Lions and Tigers, for example, we tend to sit in mid-market and enterprise. So these are very mature organizations. And so if we're going to do onboarding for our independent talent that we bring in, there's a very specific process for that. We are taking their onboarding documents, we're adapting them, we're doing all of that because that's part of the package, that's part of the deal with us. Now, if you're in more of a small business or startup space, you might not have a firm like Lions and Tigers involved. You might be going direct. So you're going to bring in a freelancer, in which case onboarding is really important, expectation setting is really important. And we also like to, I use this model for Lions and Tigers. I build my team as a blended team. And so, for example, I've done a PR sprint recently. And so I've worked directly with a freelance PR consultant, and we have an outcome in mind. And I have paid for the outcome. I actually don't care how many hours she works. Merry Christmas. She can work whatever she wants. But for us, we have a very clear contract that shows the outcome that we're going to do over the next 8 weeks together. And so scoping becomes really the name of the game. Like, how do we scope this in a way that's fair on both sides? And we're really clear with a yes or no at the end of it. Did that feel good? Because that's going to really perpetuate the next round for both parties. So scoping becomes just the most important thing as you onboard and start to design these kinds of projects. And truly then once you start to build a workforce around it, because it can be fractional short term, it could be a staff aug long term. There's many ways to do it to round out the squad that you need to get what you need done.
So that leads me to an obvious next question, which is, if I get it right, then what are the benefits for my customers and my organization itself? And if I get that right, how is it impacting the way that we manage and lead the company? And probably the flip side of that is, if I get it wrong, what's the cost?
Yeah, if I look at the survey data, 8 in 10 people said that the major benefit here is that they get a more innovative outcome. That to me is the most important message here. And I have the exact same experience because I build a blended team. I know that because I have fractions of these people's time, that I'm spreading my bets and I'm just getting so many more voices than I would be able to afford on a full-time payroll. And so that innovation component is so important to me. And truly, you asked, like, what are the risks? Speaking from my own perspective as CEO of a company, I am outperforming the market. Like, we are moving faster. I am selling more. We have more interest in our model than we do from everyone else that I'm standing sort of alongside. And I can tell you it's because I run a blended team. Like, I'm able to move faster. So I can just give you my own feedback. We've got 30% growth year over year for a reason. And so I would just say that that's my story about why blended teams are working. But I do think the stakes are quite high for leaders today. And I have tons of empathy for organizational leaders. Managers are the sandwich generation of how corporations work, and they're trying to not only manage and empathize with the mental health and performance of their team, but also the pressures of what's coming down from shareholders and stakeholders. And they're trying to balance all of that out. And now we're adding a third element, a third option. Even though it's a benefit, it is hard to manage all of that all at once. And oftentimes, as we saw from our respondents, 73% of them are caregivers. So they also have a home life that they're trying to manage. And so I just empathize with the amount of pressure that these leaders are under right now. And I would hope that this is one of the relief valves that leads them sort of faster to that innovation and outcome that they're looking for.
I concur with that. It's almost the cost of not doing it is far greater these days because the risks of failure in business and in at leadership level are far more than they were even just sort of 10 years ago, when you're not just behind on digital transformation, you're behind on AI integration. You haven't even got to agentic AI yet. You've got workforce transforming like this at a rate that has caught you by surprise because you've never heard of the blended workforce before. And I've got my own leadership to tackle.
Exactly.
I've got to grow. So why wouldn't we curate the talent of the many from inside and outside our organization to get the right mixes of skills like we did right at the beginning? And I have to say, I was nodding furiously when you were talking there because my business is built in exactly the same way. In fact, more so, I'm 100% distributed. So it for me, when you've learned how to do that, you learn to let go and to trust. And I would say that some of the independent workers that I've worked with over the years, for more than 5 years, they've become the most loyal team members I've ever had, regardless of whether they've been permanent or not. Have you had similar experience, Brea?
These folks are incredible, Jeremy. Like, I mean, I just can't even tell you how good they are, and how I feel so fortunate even to get 10 hours a week of their time. It's unreal. I'll tell you a really quick story if that's okay. So we were working with a client in an enterprise. She had come in as a new leader of a team of 11, and she came in really big. She made this big pitch to her leadership team, wrote this whole business case, and got a bunch of funding. They said, great, we're going to put some gas on your initiative. And she called me in a bit of a panic, sort of worried about what she'd gone a little over her skis, and she didn't want any attrition from her 11 team members. And so we came alongside her and crafted this blended team, this very strategic group to come alongside her, but it was through multiple phases. So the first phase is we brought in a licensed psychologist. So we did a very specific deep dive on how her team was feeling before and after, so we could document it. We then brought in this change management and org design group of 4 roughly fractional consultants that designed out the org model. And then we did all the SOPs for her team, so that they could document sort of how they were working. And then we brought in, the last phase was sort of a staff aug model where we brought in half-time project managers to support every single employee. And so then that was the team that sustained. And so for her, her outcome was, I need to grow this team actually by 3x, and I don't want to lose anybody in the process. And I'm going to do this to sort of like inch my way there in a way that is more humane, and so that I can ensure that at the end of this, everyone's so excited by the result and not feeling so burdened by it. And so anyway, I share that story because I think it's a perfect example of how you can really, you just could never hire a licensed psychologist. You just couldn't. It's just not part of the P&L. But to be able to tap in folks like that right when you need them, I mean, that's just how I have worked too at L&T. Like as I've built this business from scratch without having ever gone to get an MBA, like, I mean, this is on the street. You know, you need friends, you need allies to be able to get there faster. So that's just how we've seen it play out. It's just really smart leaders tapping in at the right time.
I just love the language that you're doing and shouting from the rafters around the important, not just the importance, but the benefits and the beauty and the humanity of a blended team and these not just the pure benefits that you talked about before, but the incidental or intentional, I don't know, benefits of how people are feeling, how they work together, how we collaborate, how we feel empowered, and how we all look at what we're trying to achieve together rather than in that traditional hierarchical way that we used to. And yeah, it's really inspiring to hear you. And I'm sure those tuning in are feeling the same. So could you please let us know, where can everybody listening get hold of the report? How do they find out more about lions and tigers and connect with you?
I would love to connect with followers and the folks that are interested in individual agency and what that looks like. So folks can find us at lionsandtigers.com. And we're very active on LinkedIn. That's a great place to connect with us. We're sharing bits about this report all the time. And I'm telling all sorts of stories about being a mother and parenting and running a business and trying to show up with two shoes that match. So LinkedIn is a great place to follow me for that sort of storytelling. But also, if anyone is interested in applying and joining a fractional workforce, they can do that on our website and or think about bringing us in to help them build a blended team. We love to talk with folks who want to build this model with intention and help them along that process.
Fantastic. Well, count me in, Brea. No problem about that. I'm absolutely sold. Thank you so much for joining me and for being so open in your sharing around the report, your own experiences and so on. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your leadership and for inspiring us all to keep going.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rethink Leadership podcast with me, Jeremy Blaine. Please like, comment and support us on your favourite platform and subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch as well as listen to each episode.